In the early hours of D-Day, Colonel Robert F. Sink, the commanding officer of the 506th, came down in a small field that lay within Drop Zone D. When he landed, he realized he was completely alone. His parachute harness had tightened severely during the descent and was now digging painfully into his flesh. Lying there in the darkness, he kept wondering how long it would take before an enemy bullet found him. He pulled out his knife and began trying to cut himself free from the harness, but the blade was far too dull to slice through it easily. Sink quickly understood that rushing would only make matters worse. He forced himself to calm down, remain quiet, and patiently work at freeing himself from the tangled straps. As he slowly regained control of his nerves and continued loosening the gear, he noticed the pale shape of a parachute canopy billowing in the corner of the field. Once he finally managed to free himself from the harness, he headed toward it. Still tangled in the other parachute was Lieutenant Samuel S. Burns from the 1st Battalion Headquarters Company. Burns told him his leg was badly injured. "See if you can put any weight on it," Sink said. "We'll try to find some of our men." Sink helped Burns across the field and pushed him through the first hedgerow they reached. Once they were on the other side, Burns collapsed and said he couldn't go any farther. He was convinced his leg was broken. Sink looked at him and said quietly, "Then I'm going to have to leave you." He found a shallow depression in the field and carefully helped Burns into it, telling him to stay there until someone came to help. After that, Sink checked his compass and decided to move east. After traveling about 300 yards, he reached a small side road. During all this time, he had unknowingly been moving parallel to the main road leading into Saint-Marie-du-Mont. In fact, he had been within 40 yards of the highway the entire time without realizing it. When he finally turned onto the road, he encountered 3 members of his regimental staff, along with the headquarters company commander, Captain Edward Peters. They paused to discuss their situation. Although none of them knew exactly how far east or west they were, they correctly guessed which road they had found. The group decided to keep moving east until they eventually came upon a small cottage. A dog inside began barking loudly. Sink and Peters knocked firmly on the door. A Frenchman appeared at an upstairs window and asked what they wanted, assuming they were German soldiers. Sink spoke enough French to call up to him that the invasion had begun. The man responded, "Très bien," and came downstairs to meet them. Though he was trembling with fear, the Frenchman was helpful. When Sink handed him a map, the man pointed out their exact location. They were only about 250 yards from the spot where Sink was supposed to establish his command post. Sink asked him about German troops in the area. The man warned them that Germans were everywhere and that there were many stationed in Saint-Marie-du-Mont. With that information, the group moved toward the command post location, picking up a few scattered soldiers along the way. When they finally reached the assembly point, they were surprised to discover that they were the first ones there. "This is it," Sink declared. "Now go out and bring in more of the boys." Meanwhile, Lieutenant Colonel Robert L. Strayer and the men in his stick had been dropped much farther north, landing in the area assigned to the 502nd Regiment. By daylight they were still near the northern causeways, but were moving in the direction of Pupville. Lieutenant Lewis Nixon had experienced a relatively smooth jump and had linked up with Captain Clarence Hester, the battalion's S3 operations officer, who had landed with the leading elements. Hester believed that the men from their stick had been scattered over a wide area, nearly 1,000 yards during the descent. To gather them, he walked about 500 yards back in the direction from which the aircraft had come, reasoning that this would place him near the center of the scattered group. There he tied a string of amber bundle lights to a tree, creating a signal for the men to find. The plan worked. Gradually, officers and soldiers began making their way toward the signal and gathering at the location. Even so, Hester still wasn't certain exactly where they were. To find out, he sent Lieutenant Nixon, the battalion's intelligence officer, to scout the nearest village. Nixon located a French resident and woke him up. The man informed him that the village was Foucaultville and that it was occupied in considerable strength by German troops. Nixon worked his way back to Strayer's temporary CP with the information. Eventually, the group would find their way to the assembly point at La Grande Chemin. Nixon would later deliver the Brecourt Manor maps to Utah Beach and escort a number of Sherman tanks back to mop up the Germans remaining at the guns.